So let's dig in. So I'll do a few slides, and then we'll hand it over to Alok, who's going to actually do the demonstration for us. So just to set the stage, problem statement here, right? So we have many organizations that have made their investment into the Microsoft 365 cloud, and as a part of doing that, not only are they quickly organically creating content, but there are, many organizations are also running consolidation initiatives, bringing file shares, other enterprise file sync and sharing tools, a bunch of different systems in here, which obviously, has a kind of compounding increase to the storage that's used in Microsoft 365. So although organizations are gaining, some pretty massive benefits from security, search or findability, user experience, and just all around kind of, like modern lifecycle management, workflow forms, all sorts of different things that, passing that storage quota limit is not cheap in SharePoint. I mean, this is, it's redundant, versioned, hot storage, that's, searchable, indexable, whatever you're talking about, top tier storage costs. So if we look at what that cost actually looks like, if we were to take, a 100 terabyte, slice over the storage quota that you get by default. So you get a default storage quota with your tenant, and you get an incremental add, for each user that's licensed in your environment. So especially if you're a data heavy organization with a low user account, or a low user count, you can quickly fall into this situation where you're paying for additional storage. So at a list price of about 20 cents per gigabyte per month for that additional SharePoint storage, 100 terabytes is going to cost you 20K extra a month on top of your Microsoft 365 licensing, that's ridiculously expensive. So what we're seeing is that there's other options for storage that are significantly lower here. Realistically, I'm probably going to update this slide because we'd probably be looking in the hot area here is what kind of works best for the archive storage that we have, but it may differ a little bit depending on each customer's use cases for needing to retrieve these older archived files. But with a hot storage, we can quickly return the content. And we're talking about that storage cost being, 90% less than what it is in SharePoint. So for 100 terabytes, we're basically talking $18,000 out of that 20,000 would be back in your pocket for the storage piece of it. Now, there are some ongoing additional costs. So, there's some Azure overhead for the solution that we have in place. There's potentially some managed support, but I think realistically, we'd be looking at less. If you were 100 terabytes over, instead of paying 20K a month, you'd be paying less than 5K to have our managed solution with all the Azure componentry and the same level of storage in there. So it's a 75% savings on what they're spending. So, needless to say, I mean, there's an obvious value to reducing a cost by 75%. But I think, Rhonda, just for your awareness, right? So some organizations, they've come to us and they're like, hey, I'm over my quota, can you help us out? And we'd start talking to them and they're like, I'm 3 terabytes over. And you're like, oh, well, that's not really enough where it makes sense, right? I mean, the overhead of the $2,000 to $3,000 a month for the Azure componentry needs to make sure that it pays off here. So we're seeing that, most customers need to be in the range of having, 30, 40 plus terabytes over their storage quota, where it really starts making sense for the solution, to have that value impact. So, okay, so with that being the case, I mean, effectively what customers need is they need the ability to have a cost-effective long-term storage archival solution that allows reasonable integration with SharePoint, Microsoft 365. And that's really what we're trying to achieve here. So talking a little bit about the solution, it's got a couple of main pieces in it. So I'll talk about the easy one on the right-hand side first, which is on demand. So at any point of time, out of the box, people can delete things, but we don't always want people to just delete it. We may need to keep it for compliance purposes, legal purposes, whatever, or even just, we want to keep it around, for a bit longer and be a little more conservative with our retention. But users have the ability to delete out of the box. We add in the ability that they can say archive this file or this folder or these folders to Azure, that they can do that manually. Now, where we have typically the larger impact is in the automated lifecycle part of this. So in the demonstration that Alok's going to show, he'll walk through, some specific parameters. I've just listed some out here as an example from a customer that we worked with previously. So they basically said that anything in SharePoint Online storage, we want to keep there for 5 years. And anything in OneDrive, we want to keep there for 2 years. After that period of time has been reached, there's certain things that actually have a retention period of 5 years or less. Once this automated process will run on a daily basis, and if it picks up a file that's gone past 5 years, we're going to check to see what is the retention period for this type of document. If it's 5 years or less, it just gets purged because there's no reason to archive it. But if the retention period is longer than 5 years, we're going to say, okay, that's in our sweet spot. Let's move this thing out to the archive. Let's put a stub in place for for folks to still be able to see that, hey, this file exists. It's just now somewhere else. So we have a process to do that. And then ultimately, we can purge. So, there's the purge process for files in SharePoint if they have the retention less than the 5 years in this case. Or if we move it to the Azure archive, it may be the case that it has a retention period of 10 years. So we don't want to keep it in Azure in perpetuity. We also, even though it's lower cost, we still want to clean it up for a variety of reasons. The cost, the risk, all of that. So we also have another component which purges the items that have been archived into the Azure Blob Storage. So all of these components are a part of that lifecycle automation for retaining, archiving, and then ultimately purging.
And so how flexible are the business rules around that automated lifecycle? And is that something that the customer manages, or does that require your team to do that work, to manage that?
It's pretty flexible. So as a part of setting up the application, we'll work with the customer to define what those retention policies are. So we can key off of created date, modified date. We can have different rules depending on different types of documents or metadata. I mean, those are all things that we can build into the business logic, because effectively what we're doing is on a daily basis, we're issuing a search against SharePoint Online saying, find everything where that meets this criteria. So as long as we can craft that into a search query, we can return those results and then operate on them accordingly in the different phases of the process. So keep in mind, as an example, I like to use this example that we have a healthcare company that we've worked with for many years, and they have certain retention policies, like they have to keep certain, like fMRI or laboratory scans for 99 years after somebody dies. That's going to be difficult for us to do because most of the time you're not tracking inside SharePoint when people are dying.
Right.
So there's going to be some situations that are going to require some significant customization, or they may just not be possible for us to do. But for the most part, if we're operating off of, authorship information or metadata that we can keep in SharePoint, we can do it.
Great. Okay. Wonderful.
Okay. So the next thing I'm going to show here, this will be the last slide before I hand it over to Alok, is just a design diagram here. So let me zoom a little bit since I know there's a lot on the page here, but I just wanted to walk you through the process. So the core of this is that we have SharePoint sites with content. This is where the information is that we're going to be, operating over. That may be created organically, or it may be the case that those get brought in through migrations, right? Now, what happens is, so we have two different segments of the application. We have this incremental piece, and then we also have this bulk piece. So the idea is very few customers think in advance about an archival lower storage cost strategy. It's usually they're, oh shit, I'm paying a bunch of money. What do I do, right? So the idea is that there may be a significant amount of content. Like we've had customers that have had hundreds of terabytes or petabytes of content with many hundreds of millions of pieces of data that needs to be reasoned over. So the reason for doing the bulk is that we can have a massive queue of information that's getting processed through over the course of time. That may take many months actually to catch us up. But to want to make sure that, for purposes of moving forward so that they're in compliance with what their policies are, they want to have a separate incremental process that on a daily basis can keep their current stuff up to date. So everything that's hitting a retention period or some kind of purge policy date, today, tomorrow, for the next couple of months. We don't want that to all be delayed for 4 or 5 months while we're catching up on a massive bulk, process of what was already in the system. So that's the only reason to distinguish between these two. One is kind of like a first time run, or you do this again. Like if you're going to do another multi-hundred terabyte migration, well, you may want to run the bulk one on that stuff again. So that doesn't also interrupt everything else that's in your system, the ongoing organic stuff.
Yeah, question for you. I'm going to pause 1 second.
Uh-huh.
So if you're doing because this is an interesting, another use case that we have where folks might have massive amounts of data in network file shares.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not really organized, and we're helping them organize it. And part of our mission is to, map those folders and file content to something sensible that has metadata around it so we
Mm-hmm.
can, make logical decisions and rationalize the information, so that it's not just this big glob of a mess of network folders. Is there a piece or a part of this transfer of data from one place to another where you could pause and do that of transformation or mapping into a SharePoint site, or integrate some metadata into the mix here as it's making its way to archive?
That would typically be a separate part of the solution. So our solution here is focusing on archiving content that's already in Microsoft 365. So if you've got
Okay.
content in a file share that
Mm-hmm.
that would need to be moved into Microsoft 365 in order for it to fall subject to what the solution provides. So
Mm-hmm.
typically we do that through a migration service offering
Okay.
where we could partner with you to effectively analyze, do information architecture planning so that we
Mm-hmm.
move it with the right structure, metadata. We can promote, things in the title or the folder structure into metadata
Mm-hmm.
so that it can be searched, it can be used in business processes more effectively, or whatever, run through a lifecycle management with better metadata. You can also use syntax for things like that. So we've had
Mm-hmm.
a number of scenarios where customers have wanted to migrate a content that has a pretty consistent layout, and you can have syntax help promote information from within the document into
Mm-hmm.
the library and then be used for the same number of things I just talked about.
Mm-hmm.
But the only thing that we really do from an enrichment point of view as a part of this lifecycle process is that when we archive things from SharePoint into the Azure Blob Storage, we
Mm-hmm.
write some custom kind of keyword tags in there that are used as part of the retention and purge from the blob storage. So when we create something in the blob storage, there's some limitations on which fields you can manage.
Okay.
So we actually create a couple of custom fields to say, like, this is the ultimate purge date of this thing, and we operate against it so we can operate efficiently.
Got
So
it.
yeah.
Got it. Okay. Cool. Thank
Okay.
you very much. That was
No
really
problem.
useful. Yeah.
So the way the process works is, so on a daily basis, we have an Azure function which is either going to do, or which will be doing the incremental search. The bulk obviously will kick it off one time and it will go, but they do the same things. They're going to go search for files. In this case, for incremental, it's going to say which ones in the last 24 hours or which one today are hitting our policy rules that we define with each business individually. So that search query returns a list of items that are going to be the ones that need action taken on them. And that's going to get processed through another function that is going to say, okay, well, what do I do with this one? This one is, it's hit its 5-year retention today. It's only got a 4-year retention policy. I'm going to delete it. There's another one hit its 5-year, but it's got an 8-year retention policy. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that. So we have this, we've got this decision here to say, is the retention period is the total retention period more than the SharePoint retention period? If it's yes, then go ahead and we create some folder structure and move those files with the right metadata into the lower cost blob storage. And if no, we just we delete it. Right, it's gone. And so very similar activity for the bulk thing, except for we're not running that every day. That's one big kick that we do. But otherwise, the logic's exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a couple other things that Alok will show is that So we have some SPFX controls, which are listed up here. So we have a viewer control so that an administrator for any site collection can go and look at all of the folder structure and archived files that are in the associated storage container. So they can reason over that.
Mhm.
And we've also got another SPFX extension, which adds the capabilities into any new library that's created, so that somebody can select or multi-select files and folders and say, archive this. So that facilitates that manual archival piece. So that's most of the solution. There is a little bit more componentry with some Azure functions that perform a similar activity to what these ones do in SharePoint. They perform the same activity in the Azure Blob Storage, because we also want to query that every day to say, okay, what's now meant its final retention period so that we can, get rid of that for good. So this was already busy enough, so we decided to leave that out. But that's another little branch of what we have in the AllUp design here. That all makes sense?
It does. Great. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to hand it over to Alok now, who is the mastermind behind this and has the demo ready. So Alok, over to you, bud.
Thanks, Drew. Let me share my screen. Please let me know once my screen is visible.
We can see it. Thank you, Alok.
Thanks, Rhonda. So for this demo, we have set up simple business rules for archival. What we have configured is for a site, a particular document which has been modified in last 5 years is considered an active document. Any document from 5 years to 10 years is considered a document and an inactive document, and it is to be archived. And any document that has been modified before 10 years is considered to be no longer of business use and is purged from the data store or library everywhere. Okay. So we have set up a simple library, a document library with sales reports folder. And here we have created chronological folders for years from 2010 till 2022. Ideally, since we are on 21st of June 2023, any document which has been last modified before 21st June 2018 should be archived. Any document which was last modified before June 21st 2013 should be purged, should be removed altogether. That is how we have configured retention policy on this library. So let us first start. So as Drew was mentioning, there are two pathways. One is user triggered or on-demand archival process. So as an user, I can go to a particular document and I can request a specific archival, which can be done through top navigation bar or from context menu for that folder, for the document, sorry. When I click the archive, it requests for confirmation. Once confirmed, it shows a progress message on the top, and once it succeeds, it provides a confirmation that it has been archived, and it refreshes the page, and now the document has been replaced with a link to the document. Okay, now just to show you what document is, let me go to our blob store. This is a container where this is a storage account where it would be moved to. As of now, you see there is nothing here. So let me refresh it. And you would see that it has created a container with the name of the site collection here. And in this folder, in this container, sorry, it has created a folder structure, starting with the library name, and then any nested folder structure that we may have. And when I reach there, I see that my document is there now. Now, when I click on this link, which is here, it opens a preview of the document here in the SharePoint itself, even though document resides in Azure Blob Store. We can select more than one document as well, multiple documents in one go. Archive it. And same process, it asks for confirmations, shows progress message, and then finally provides a confirmation. And so this time around, I will show you this another method to do it. On in the site on the left navigation menu, we see that we have archives link here. If I click on this link here, it shows me the same. It shows me the folder structure from Azure Blob Store. On the top level, I see the document library, and then we see the same folder structure as we saw in the Blob Store, and we can see all of our files here. We can click any file here, and we can see its preview here. We can also click this context menu here, and then we would see any metadata which was there associated with that file would come here. So for example, in this case, we had a custom metadata defined in terms of region, and it has captured that value here. Now let me go back to our documents library. And not just files, we can archive the entire folder. I can select more and more folder and then archive it. Now, when we archive a folder, it archives the files, not folder. Okay. So it is processing them.
So it's leaving the container for that folder name.
Yes.
But it's moving the content.
Yeah. Idea was that we may have other dependency on the folder structure, and we may want to retain the folder structure. And this is something which can be configured. If we want to move everything, we can do that also.
Yeah, Rhonda, the idea here was that, and this is an optional configuration. So we can decide, what gets kept here, but especially if we're going to leave document stubs. So you'll see, you see what Alok's doing here, that as the files are moved, we're replacing the files with a document link or a link to document.
I love that. Yeah, I love that, because
so some customers may not want that. They may just want to say, hey, like, we don't want people clicking on this thing anymore. It's only available for the administrator to see. But if we do want to keep that in there, then it's very relevant to keep that folder structure. I think if we don't put the stub links in there, then potentially you would make a different decision. But we're kind of trying to show the full thing here.
Yeah, I like it, and I get it. One question for you. So that's very elegant. The way it's designed, I like it a lot. One question is around the approval process. So I'll give you a scenario. You might have a records manager who is, sort of running point on keeping an eye on all the activities going on the archiving front and the purging front. And that person might need to, before they do take any action, get approval from a partner whose matter it is, and say to that partner, hey, I need you to approve me for archiving this stuff. Is there a part of the process or a way to inject a workflow decision by another user?
It's a good question. So we have not actually built that component yet, but we had a large retail customer in the US that we worked on designing the solution for, that they wanted to have effectively what Microsoft calls a disposition review.
Yes,
so
exactly.
So there is that concept inside the Microsoft 365 Compliance Center, but they don't have the ability to do the archival piece. It's more just deciding whether you're deleting it or not. So it's not something we've built yet, but that is something that we've got like a design in mind for. So whether we want to do workflows and notifications and or having a dashboard that's available for somebody who's in charge of the disposition approval, we can have an approval process in place that requires somebody to actually look at it and approve it before it takes action.
Yeah, that it seems like such a natural, given all the capabilities with SharePoint and what you guys already have built. Just adding that dashboard and disposition approval process workflow would be just dynamite.
So that's definitely something we can talk about as far as the service offering. There would just
Mhm.
be, you know, some additional implementation costs to put that into place.
Great. Is that on your roadmap, on your development roadmap? And if so, is that like something in the 6-month or 12-month?
So the way we're playing this right now, Rhonda,
Mhm.
is that although there is some innovation happening in the product organically, that most of the innovation is actually happening as we get customer deals.
Got it.
So we're not actually charging the customers for the full development cost. That what we would do is we would basically put together a contract that allows us to retain the IP, and we would build
Mhm.
it for the customer at a much or a significantly discounted cost versus them paying us for all the hours that it would take. So
Mhm.
we're typically playing it like that. So
Mhm.
I'm not sure whether in the near term this would be something that we would just be building in house. More than likely, we'll wait for a customer ask and approach it that way. But
Got it.
you know, by all means, if there's intent and somebody wants to do it, you know, we'll make sure that we put together a competitive offer in place along the lines of what I just mentioned.
Cool. Okay. Good answer, Drew. All right.
Okay.
Great.
Okay. So this was a on-demand archival flow.
Mhm.
Apart from this, we have second piece, which is automated archival based on the retention policies that have been set up. Every night a job would run that would find out files which are ready to be archived or removed from SharePoint altogether. Okay, so let me. So usually it runs automatically, but here for the demo, let me trigger it manually. So let me run it. So it would take few minutes to process, and while it is processing, so there. Let me tell you that there are two processes. One process cleans up SharePoint. It moves files for archival as well as removes any old files. At the same time, we have second job that would clean up the blob store. They would have different frequencies based on business priorities. So they can run every night also, depending on how we want to configure them. Or it can be that SharePoint disposal runs every night, while the blob storage can run with a more length, maybe once a month or once a week, depending on how we want to configure it. Apart from this, whatever activities tool is performing, onboarding or offboard or automated, sorry, on demand and automated, all of it is logged in logs, and that is available for auditing by the organization. So we don't have a dashboard, we have raw data here, but all of the data is available for audit later on.
Mhm.
Okay, so let me see if it is, yeah, it is completed. So let me just quickly refresh this. So if I see now 2012, I do not see any files in here because job finds that none of 2012 files should be either on SharePoint or in Blob Store. They are more older than 10 years. Similarly, if I go to 2013, we would see that some of the files have been removed. Two of the files have been removed because those were last modified before 21st June 2013. And the three files that were last modified after 21st June have been archived. Similarly, if I go to 2018, the files which were last modified before okay, this one, it is not archived, others are archived. And then rest of the files, when I see 2019, I see all of the files are there. Similarly, 2021, all of the files are there. So rest of the files are there. Okay. Now we can see that in the archive also. So we have folders. So we have two folders, 2010 and 2011. These were the ones that we manually or rather on demand archived. And since those were already moved to Azure Blob Store, those remain there. Similarly, for 2010, 2011, we archived all the files. So those are still there. But there is no folder for 2012 because it was directly purged from SharePoint. Similarly, for 2013, three files are there and two have been purged. And similarly, we have for others. Okay. Now we can see the same in our blob store also. We can see that we have folders with the same name. And if we look at 2016, we see all five files have been archived. Now, this was the first job. Let's go to the second job. The second job is responsible for cleaning up any file that was archived, and now it is ready to be purged from the system. But it resides on blob store. Okay. Let me run it. And it will take a few minutes.
So as that's running, I have a question for you regarding the purge and whether or not there's a audit trail of that purge, like, you know, when it was run, is there any sort of leave behind?
Every action that's performed by tool is logged and is available for audit. There's no UI as of now.
Okay.
But that can that is easily that can be done. So data is available for auditing.
Okay.
So if I can now come back to our application and we see archive, we see that 2010 and 2011 has been removed. And similar and other files which were, for example, these were last modified after 21st June. So those are still there. Okay. Now let me take you to second. So next, we have seen that it was automatically applied to documents library. Now, if we create any document library after this feature has been activated, let's say test library 4. Let me create a new document. Library. Right, that should not rename it. So, any case, so you would see that when I select this document, it has automatically archive link. We do not have to do anything additional. Same features available to any document library which is created in future as well. So let me archive it. Once I archive it, it will once it succeeds, it comes back, refreshes the page, provides a link, and when I click on this link, it shows us a preview of the file. And then what I can do, I can go back to our archives folder, and I can see that now it has got two top level folder, one for documents and second for test library 4. And with the document here. So any questions, Rhonda?
Yeah, I have a quick question about the viewer that you guys are using. Does it support drawing files like AutoCAD drawings and other types of image files as well? Like how many file types does it support outside of Word and PDF?
As of now, we are supporting on Word documents, or rather, Word documents, PDFs, and XLX files and images. So drawing, and then for other types of files, for example, if I say zip files.
When
we have an option to download the file and preview it on using tools available on application, and and there are other options also. Okay, that once we, for example, there may be some options to getting third-party tools. For example, if drawing files are very important for some customers, so we have proprietary viewers available that we can use. That is something I believe, Drew. Please keep me honest here. There would some additional. So there's a third-party tools which are available, which we have. preview tools are available that we have to plug it in our application. So there may be a cost associated with that for that customer. Otherwise, they will always have an option to download it and view it with the tool that they already have on their system installed.